Hey everyone, on today's episode of Hear Me Out, I sit down with Victoria, the manager of training at Starkey, Canada, to talk all things hearing aids. So let's get to it. Hi Victoria, thank you so much for joining me on an episode of Hear Me Out.
April, I am so delighted to be here. My goal is maybe one day I'll have the honor of being the first guest to be invited back again. What I'm going for.
Never know, maybe you will be. So let's get started. How did you become involved in the hearing loss world?
I was a person that grew up with a grandparent that was very hard of hearing, beyond maybe the average typical. So I remember him having a body aid, actually, which is a fairly older style of aid, even for the time. This was the 80s. He had a body aid that and the cord that led up to one ear. So his hearing loss was quite apparent to us growing up. He did eventually manage to morph into behind the ear, power behind the ear hearing aids. And I don't even really know what the genesis of his hearing loss was. He grew up overseas. I think it was just something from a childhood, maybe disease, not sure, but it certainly left him very hearing impaired. So I was interested in communication disorders quite early. I went to university and got an undergraduate degree in communication disorders, which meant at the time you got to learn a little bit about speech language pathology as well as audiology. They're kind of considered sister professions. And then I went ahead to my grad school and I decided to go into the world of audiology. It just seemed to suit me better. The technology, the kind of almost instant results, right? That idea of you put hearing aids on somebody, they pretty instantly, as you know from your experience, right? Know that, oh my gosh, like the whole world suddenly sounds different. Speech pathology was going to require way more patience than I have. So that's led me to audiology, and I have been in the world of audiology now since 1995. So I guess I'm coming up to my 30-year anniversary. We'll have to have a little party.
That's amazing. That's really incredible. I love hearing the connections to hearing loss, and that's like very interesting that you took your family experience and followed a career path in that. I think that's fantastic. Can you now dive into a little bit about the styles of hearing aids that you work with on a day-to-day basis?
Absolutely. Like I said, I have seen in my life and have used, body aid hearing aids. I shouldn't say I've used them. I've seen people intimately in my life use them. But we can say that we have pretty much evolved away from that. And hearing aids now look very different, even from the ones that were very common in the 90s.
Right.
I'm going to use some three very broad classifications. Okay.
Okay.
It might not be the ones that you find online, but here's my three. Broadly speaking, you can have very invisible, tiny hearing aids. I happen to have an example. So there are tiny little invisible hearing aids. This one happens to be called a completely in the canal. I can pop it in my ear because this one is made for my ear. And this class of hearing aids, these completely in the
Kind of
canal or
gone blurred there when you turn your face to the side, but that's okay. We can see it a little bit.
a little bit, you really wouldn't see anything much anyways, because these are meant to be invisible. There's ones even a step size smaller called the IIC, invisible in the canal, these completely in the canal. So these are very discreet, very cosmetic appealing. The next broad category that I think about are aids that more fill the entire ear or most of the ear. So the hearing aid itself, all one piece, fits into the ear, slides into the ear, but fills more of the ear than these more invisible style of aids. Have you had any experience with any of those two styles, April?
No, so I've just worn the behind the ears and I have custom
Yeah.
molds now. Before I started with the domes, now I've
Yeah.
got the
That
molds.
absolutely. So that's that third class, and this is by far the most popular or common type of hearing instruments that are sold. Like 80% of
Oh,
hearing aids
wow.
that are dispensed in North America, anyways, are something that sits behind the ear, very much like you are an ambassador for. That you are very proud and show the world, right? With these little domes, the thin tube that fits down the side of your ear, and there's a component that sits in behind the ear.
Right.
Exactly so. So these are ones that we consider of a more behind the ear style. So those would be the three kind of broad
Okay.
categories that I think of.
Wow. Technology is very wild. There's so many like variations and options. I love it. Now, with regards to those styles, do you like are there specific styles you were like offer more to people depending on the type of hearing loss, or is it really like preference style, how people want it to look?
There can be, there's kind of a couple of layered different factors, and there absolutely is hearing loss. It's a huge consideration. The degree of loss, also something that we refer to as the configuration of loss, which is just a fancy way of saying like, how much hearing loss do you have in each pitch that has been
Right.
tested, right? So some hearing losses can be better suited for some types of hearing aids. That tiny one that I showed you, for instance, that's really going to block up your ear canal. Like if you put your fingers in your ears, I know that you've experienced this to some extent. Do you know what I'm going to talk about?
Yeah.
Yeah. How you get blocked up, right? How you
Mhm.
sound like your own voice sounds hollow in your head, even when you stick your fingers in your ears and you talk to
Mhm.
yourself. The same thing happens if you block up your ears with these tiny aids, even to some extent, aids that one piece that fully sit in your ear.
Right.
So sometimes if you have a hearing loss that you hear better in the low pitches, poorer in the high pitches, it can be distracting or difficult for people to be fully plugged up with tiny little hearing aids.
Oh.
Mind over matter though, right? There are some people whose types of hearing losses you can tell them like that's probably not going to be the best start for you. And they'll be like, no, no, I want the tiniest. So that's where that layered in factor of what
Right.
you want, the person's desires, right?
Right.
So, most hearing aids these days can have a varying degree of power and can fit varying degrees of hearing loss.
Right.
We at Starkey, we have a bit of a phrase. It's called the ear is boss, because also this type of ear that you have, ears come in all sorts of sizes.
Right.
Sometimes your ear is the limiting factor. Some ears are tiny, twisted, tortured. Some ears are very large and straight. Those can be like compounding factors as to what we can build to fit in a person's ear. So there's a lot of different variability in there. That's why it's so difficult to talk to a hearing professional and say, what type of hearing aid is best for me? Oh, well, it's kind of like what flavor of ice cream might you like the most? No, it can depend on the day. Other factors that I think of when it comes to the world of hearing aids are things like people's dexterities, right? You can
Right.
see people can sometimes struggle with certain styles of hearing aids. Maybe their fingers are numb, so it can be more difficult for them to
Yeah.
work with small aids or aids with two pieces. Sometimes people have special needs or wants or desires, right? We might get into this a little later, but hearing aids are very sophisticated these days, and they can connect wirelessly to many different devices.
Yeah.
But that wireless connection isn't available in every style of aid. Telecoils, which I know one of your first guests on one of these YouTube podcasts mentioned, what like telecoils can be extraordinarily helpful for opening up the world outside your house to you. Telecoils aren't available in every style of aid. Yeah. So when you think of like what you need now that you're experienced with hearing aids, I'm sure it helps guides you on the style that you would choose.
It's funny that you bring that up because I have very sensitive ears. So when I get those adjustments, if I need a big adjustment, we have to go in stages because I can't take it all at once. And I started with the domes, but it wasn't enough power. And so we built up to the custom molds by slowly increasing the dome size to get to this so that it wasn't too much on my ears at once because then I wouldn't wear my hearing aids and it kind of defeated the purpose because they were uncomfortable. So we had to go in gradual stages. Like you said, ears are the boss. Like it's kind of got to feel and listen to what they are telling you. So
Yeah, that's why hearing professionals and patients need to like really work together. It really needs to be a partnership because rarely is it like a pop it in, walk out of the office and never come back. There's lots
it's
of
totally
options and modifications.
Yeah. One of the most asked questions I get is like, what's the safest way to clean your ears? Because some people get a lot of wax buildup. Some people, for me, example, I get itchy, moist ears. So like, what's the safest way at home? Because you're seeing a lot of these like kits you can buy and do at home. Like, are those really safe?
They can be. Short answer is they can be. Yeah, this might be showing my age. There's an old saying, don't put anything larger than your elbow in your ear. That, to a certain extent, is true. In terms of putting something down your ear, it gives hearing professionals like the shivers to hear, like, oh, yeah, I used a Q-tip, even something like a Q-tip. We don't love hearing that that went down a person's ear canal, and I'll explain why in a minute. But even things like bobby pins or keys, like people put crazy things down their ears, April. You know how sensitive your ear canals are. The skin down there, it's not used to things being touched down there. So
Right.
to scratch it just makes me feel like, oh. But the other interesting thing that many people don't know about ear canals is that the wax glands are actually very deep in the ear canals, and they generate that wax, and hair cells after, sorry, the skin cells in your ear canal actually migrate out. It's actually supposed to push out, and it pushes along any debris such as wax or dirt that's in your ear. So what happens when people put a Q-tip down their ear canal is it's kind of like a battering ram. All
Pushing
that
it.
wax, yeah, that's on its journey, slow as it may be, on its way out the ear canal, gets pushed all back to the start line again, right?
Ah,
So that's what I think. It's great to use a Q-tip on this outside, this bowl area of the ear, no problem. But don't put anything down your ear because you're just pushing it down and you're going to damage your eardrum. Because people absolutely, you hear all sorts of horror stories about people popping their eardrums because they don't realize, that they shouldn't be going
right.
down so far. So you mentioned kits. I, a professional audiologist in my home, have earwax. These are like little dissolving droplets that you would get in one of those kits. We have them here in my house because they absolutely work to soften and sometimes help dissolve the earwax so that it moves more easily out of your ear. I have like just an average syringe, and I'll take warm water and I'll flush it down my own ear canal if it's plugged, or family members, right? So you can absolutely do things like this if you're gentle, because again, a lot of force of water could hurt your ear canal. But if you're gently swishing out your ear, this is not going down your ear canal, it's just at the entrance. These are special drops because they're, formulated with some moisturizer in them and some hydrogen peroxide and some oils. But literally, to soften the wax in your ears, you can use any type of oil other
Hmm.
than motor oil. Yeah.
Well, that's good to know because I know, yeah, like most people think like earwax means dirty and like I must get it out, but there is a protective barrier to it too. Am I right?
Absolutely. It's actually one of those things that evolutionarily wise, we actually think not only was it designed to help like move debris out of the ear, but it also evolved to keep bugs from staying in your ears. Because when you think of your ear canals, you mentioned that your ears are very humid, right? It's a lovely, warm, moist place for bugs to crawl into, April. So
Didn't think of that
earwax
one.
is sticky and it's a little smelly. It's unpleasant. So just like a little interesting trivia fact about why we think that there's earwax.
New thing to worry about now. Bugs in your ears. No, I'm just kidding.
I know, let me tell you, I've heard from a few hearing professionals who have, taken their little ear light, peeked into an ear and seen a little buggy looking back out at them. Like it's not an
Oh my
uncommon
goodness.
story. I know everybody is having horrors at home. It's
Oh
not
geez, that's too
typical,
funny.
but it has happened.
So now, what's the best way to clean hearing aids at home? And how often should people do this?
Yeah, absolutely. This can be very simple. And I do believe that most people are sent home with instructions, but let's face it, when you sit down, how overwhelmed did you feel coming home for the first time with your aids?
I don't even know if I like remembered half the stuff that was probably told to me because I was still just overwhelmed with my diagnosis, even though I had had it a few months before getting the hearing aids. So yeah, it was literally probably in one ear, out the other, regardless if I heard it or not.
1000%. And it's also true that generally, do we learn everything that we're told once? No. So it makes good sense that people might get a lot out of these reviews. So using these two sets of aids that I have in front of me again, I'm just going to take a couple. First thing, you could just take a clean, dry cloth. This happens to be a Kleenex, just clean and dry. And you wipe the surface of whatever, of the whole aid, quite frankly. Even the part that's sitting behind your ear can be wiped down. The part that goes in your ear, certainly you want to give a good wipe to, right? Generally, you don't need anything that's going to have any moisture or anything, right? It's fine, clean, dry cloth. Fantastic. Little side note. Please, when you're storing your aids, use an actual case. People will use things like Kleenexes, and then what happens? They wrap them up in the Kleenexes, they put them off to the side,
You forget about it. Or your
and
dog grabs them or something. Yeah.
people clean the room and pick them up and toss them out. There's so many things that happen to them. So put them in your
Right.
case, but that's an aside. So yes, you wipe them with your clean, dry cloth. And then many people have a little tiny like black brush that comes, and that's great. But as I mentioned, there are people with dexterity or vision problems. You can take a toothbrush, a clean toothbrush, and you brush the
Wow.
surface of your aids. The part that sits down in your ear probably is going to
Mhm.
get the most vigorous brushing. And
Right.
here's my hot tip. Brush so that as you're brushing, the wax, the debris would fall out.
Right.
I know it's very tempting for you to be looking and
So
brushing,
true.
but what happens then? You're
It's
actually
back down.
putting, yeah, yeah. So if you can, train yourself to brush it the other way, you're just probably going to avoid a few more issues that way. Just brush that way. Fantastic.
That's a good tip. And if you don't have the custom molds and you use the domes, how often should they be changed?
That is one of the things that really depends on your ears. People who
Okay.
have very waxy ears, you want to maybe change them on a monthly basis or whatever you're comfortable with. Like you might be like, "Ooh, I don't love the fact that that's got stuff on it." You want to change it? Go right ahead. Other
Got
people
it.
who suffer on the other end, whose ears are very dry, they could keep those going for quite some time.
Yeah. That's good to know.
The other little tips is that, of course, hearing aids have microphones on them, and microphones can get dirt on them.
Right.
Generally, if you look at your hearing aids, you can generally tell, oh, that's probably where the microphone is. Like you'll see tiny little holes. Again, just take your brush and brush over them. You're not going to harm anything. Again, try to train yourself so that the microphone is facing down, right? So that on this little tiny aid, it's here, and I'm just brushing the faceplate quite vigorously. Brush, brush, brush. Fantastic. The last thing that I tell people is that almost always, but not all the time, but fairly commonly, we send people home with wax guards. They tend to come in cases. Looks familiar? Yeah. They tend
Yes.
to look like cases that are fairly similar to this, and they have these sticks in them, and there are wax traps on the ends of hearing aids. And you just, it sounds simple, but all of this, takes a certain amount of coordination and sight. So this is the sort of thing that if you're not confident about, maybe a family member could be, or I know that many staff members at the hearing clinics that you go to are also trained to do this and happy to do it. It takes, not even 2 minutes to pop out a wax guard and put in another one. And how often you do that, again, depends on if you know you have waxy ears. Maybe you're doing it as a preventative maintenance every 2 or 3 weeks. You're just changing it. Anytime you ever put in your hearing aid and you hear nothing from it, it's the first thing you should do is change your wax guard.
That's good to know. Yeah. I find I change them, yeah, probably like every 2 weeks or so. Or if I notice like extra feedback, I'm like, must be
Yeah.
time to change them or clean them
Yes.
or change the
All,
battery.
all of those things. I know that people often are also interested in things like dryers, hearing aid
Mhm.
dryers, right? Is that something that you use routinely?
Yes. So because I have the moist ears, I have like an ear dryer that I use after I
Right, I've
shower
seen that.
so that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can put my hearing aids in faster.
Yep,
And then I have like a little dryer disinfectant, like UV light thing that I use. I should
yep.
use it probably nightly, but I use it a few times a week just to help draw more of that moisture out.
100%. Now, hearing aids are pretty good these days at having a high, what's called an IP rating, an ingress protection rating. It's like it's a rating that's an international rating about how well your hearing aids or any other electronics, all electronics have IP ratings, how
Right.
well they're protected against things like moisture and dust. But even with all of that, it's a great preventative step. To take an electronic dry aid kit is fabulous, the one that you plug in. There are
Yeah.
also passive dry aid kits that use beads in the bottom
Okay.
that you can like dry out the beads again and use them. That you can just drop them in, as you mentioned, nightly. It can be a case where you store your aids overnight and they're also being dried at the same time. Or maybe you just do it every couple of weeks. It's not going to hurt your hearing aids to sit in a dry aid kit.
Right. And do you find that like most people should have that in their like hearing loss toolkit, or is it just kind of more again depending on
I think it's a fabulous
your
thing because you
lifestyle?
have like these are an investment. You know, no matter
Right.
what technology level you invest in with hearing aids, these are an investment. And a passive dry aid kit is maybe $15, one that you're not plugging into the wall. For
Right.
$15, if it's helping to extend the life and reduce the likelihood of repair, that is a great return on your investment.
That's such a good point. And I think that's a little hard pill to swallow too, is having to buy those additional pieces that you might not think you need, but they really do help you in the long run keep your
Oh my
hearing
gosh,
aids
it's like
going
getting the
longer.
screen protectors, right? You've just invested hundreds of dollars in your phone. You're like, you want me to spend another $50 on a screen protector? But how many of us have kicked ourselves when we realize, oh, look at that scratch, or
Should have.
I've dropped it and it's chipped, and you
That's
realize,
a good point.
yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah.
so true.
You try to
We've
save
touched
money in the long in the short run, and it costs you in the long.
That's very true. That is a very good way to look at it. Now we've touched on this a little bit about how you've seen hearing technology change in the last few years, but I know Starkey's made some pretty big jumps within technology these last few years. So how have you seen that all evolve?
Yeah, I know that one of your guests, I think the last guest on the series, was talking about how he's been in it long enough that he's seen like the screwdriver hearing aids.
Yeah,
Same thing, right? I've graduated in 1995. And all hearing aids now are computerized, right? You attach them to computers, and that's how the hearing professional programs them and fine tunes them.
right.
So for me, the biggest change that I've seen in hearing aids is the fact that they're multi-purpose devices now.
Okay.
When you think hearing aids of pretty much before 2010, they were amplifiers. They were getting very good at amplifying specific areas and helping more with noise. But since 2010, 2012, we've really seen hearing aids become not just really good hearing aids to keep you connected to sound, but they're also health and lifestyle devices. They're wireless headphones,
So
right?
true.
Do you use your hearing aids for streaming as well?
I do, and I actually call them premium earbuds because that's what they are. They're custom to me.
Mhm.
They help me hear, but I also Bluetooth music, movies, TV, whatever. So they're my personalized premium
Yeah.
earbuds is what I call them.
Yeah. So you can connect directly to your smartphone, which is
Mhm.
huge, right? All of those instructions if you're driving someplace, the YouTube videos, FaceTime calls stream directly into your hearing aids. So that's a beautiful thing. We also have individual standalone devices for your home TV. You know what it's like to listen to the TV without your hearing aids and try to find the right volume between you and the rest of your family?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
can be a lot.
it can be. It's one of the most common comments that we hear from family members when they come in with a person who has a hearing loss. Be like, oh my gosh, the TV, it's a bit of a problem, right? We have TV devices that you plug in to your TV and it streams the signal directly to the hearing aids. everybody else is hearing the volume they want to hear, and you are hearing through your hearing aids at the volume you need to hear. There are table microphones. There are mini mics that you can clip to somebody else, and it streams the signal directly into your ear. So if you're at a lecture, you could put the microphone at the top, at the front of the room, and that's beamed directly back to your ear so that you're not missing the sound anymore. So those sort of things are huge. But on top of that, in the last 4 years, something that Starkey has done well, and a lot of other manufacturers, to be fair, because the whole world is really understanding that hearing care is brain care.
Yeah.
We're understanding more and more through studies that are done that have nothing to do with it. This isn't being studies being done in the world of hearing industry. This is being done out in the world of overall general health, cognitive decline, and how it's related to your untreated hearing loss, balance issues. And now we realize people with a hearing loss have 3 times greater risk of falling. Diabetes, there's a correlation between diabetes and hearing loss. Now, that's not a causation, but we know that when you have diabetes, you often also have a hearing loss. Cardiovascular disease and hearing loss is also correlated. And what's interesting about all of that, and it's been mentioned in some of the other videos that you've done, is the social withdrawal portion. When you're not hearing well, you're not generally as confident of going out into the world. That reduces your physical activity and it reduces your social activity.
Yeah.
And those things feed into things like cognitive decline, cardiovascular, diabetes, all of it. So one thing that our hearing aids do now is they actually monitor your steps. They monitor your social interaction, and they tell you how active you're being, because knowledge is power, right? Why do all of us wear these happy little Fitbits and activity trackers, right? Because it allows us to feel like we're in control and we know what we should be doing. But in the absence of information, like how many steps did I do today? I don't know. Oh, wait, my little device will tell me. The same thing with our hearing aids. Was I out and about in this past week? Let me see on my device. Was I? Because it monitors the conversations that you're having with others, not in a big brother sort of way. It's just simply telling you that you were in a social environment. It's not recording anything. The other really nifty thing that is quite unique to Starkey hearing aids is that idea of how correlated hearing loss are to falls. And we know falls at a certain age, above the age 50, as I am, April, we don't bounce. And we might want to get up off the ground, but sometimes those falls, result in breaking bones. And we know that falls can be the start of a health crisis for people. So our hearing aids can actually send notifications to the family members of the people who are wearing hearing aids to say, this person has fallen.
That's amazing.
Check on them. And we know that it has actually saved lives. It is so fulfilling. It's a remarkable feature.
I'm so happy you touched on that point, though, about the hearing health in general and the cognitive awareness and all that stuff, because I think that's a huge point that kind of gets missed in the hearing loss world. And I'm really glad that it's being talked about more, because I think that might be the driving factor to get more people to get hearing tests, to pay more attention to their hearing. And hopefully more people get the hearing care they need sooner than later, because like you said, it can make a drastic difference down the line.
Certainly generationally, what we know is that like a generation before the baby boomers, what was terrifying to them was cancer. We're doing better in cancer these days. Baby boomers and my generation, what we fear is cognitive decline. And there is such a strong correlation between untreated hearing loss and cognitive decline that we are trying to let people know about, and that I think people are getting better aware of. This is a very simple way of keeping yourself. It's just one more of those little factors that you can control, under your control. Just like doing your daily Wordle, put on your hearing aids.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Victoria. This has been so informative and educational, and I hope people can take from this the importance of your hearing health. And I'm just so grateful that you've come on.
I've had a delightful time. Happy to do it again.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank